Hey, welcome everybody to Trend Talks BizSec. I'm your host, Jon Clay, VP of Threat Intelligence, and this is episode 38. Joining me again, as always, is Greg Young, VP of Cybersecurity at Trend. Greg, how are you today?
John, awesome.
Good.
What's going
We're
on?
getting into the holiday season here, right? End of the year.
Cybersecurity does not take holidays.
That is true. I've had many Fridays where a new vulnerability gets disclosed, and guess what? We are working over the weekend, which is unfortunate. But I think so. This week, obviously, we're coming up to the end of the year. So Greg and I are going to talk a little bit about what trends we think we're going to see going into 2025 within the industry. And so I'm looking forward to this talk because we get to talk futures, right?
Yep. Yeah. And that's a good thing to look ahead.
Exactly. So I think the first area, and Greg, you're probably the bigger expert at this, is we're going to talk a little bit about the startup forecast. I think, what do we have? 3,500 plus cybersecurity companies in the world these days. And what do you think the market's going to look like next year for startups?
Yeah, I think it's the startup environment right now is, I think, driven more by free money. And that's certainly not the case. You know, when we had very cheap money, investors were willing to throw a lot of money at startups. So a lot of these companies had a lot of runway, and it was very easy to start one. Well, now, not so much. Money's more expensive. I think that's probably the biggest driver. And until that changes, I don't suspect we'll see that. We're always going to have some startups, but nothing like we've seen. So I think it's going to be a very anemic kind of startup culture. And certainly a lot of the ones that have been established in the last year, they've run out of runway, and a lot of them have been seeking sort of changes of ownership events.
Yeah, and I think, thinking about what would a startup do these days, obviously you have to go AI, right? Because if you're not doing AI, no one's going to want to probably dump some money into you, because that seems to be the hot area for most startups these days. But it's interesting, when you kind of talk about harder, more expensive to do things, right? And think about, most of these startups are probably going to have to incorporate AWS or some kind of cloud infrastructure. And as we're seeing more and more that the cloud maybe is not as money efficient as it used to be.
Yeah, compute is expensive, and even when you use cloud or use off-prem, it's going to be expensive. And with so much more telemetry and data that we're using in security now, that has a cost. And AI training, of course, that also has a cost. I think that maybe startups will maybe be post AI. That yes, they're going to use AI much like we use cloud today. However, with so many larger, well-established companies now moving into AI and having the money to meet those expenses, maybe the startups are going to do things other than just pure security AI. So maybe other things around operations, other things around, potentially helping with be quantum safe, things like that, challenges that the big companies really aren't looking at too much.
Yeah. And, one huge cost that I think a lot of people aren't realizing and is going to be a problem moving forward is power. How do I power my AI data center, whether that's, local or whether it's going somewhere else? I saw a chart the other day where for the U.S. data center capacity, it's going to be about 30 plus gigawatts short of power to power the AI data centers. And where are you going to do that? I mean, one guy was mentioning there's a Canadian PM that's offering some really good incentives to build them in Canada, your area, because you got good access to traditional powers, which is going to be needed to drive the power these days, because you're not going to build a nuclear plant in a year, right? It's going to take years and years, and regulations are hurting. So what do you do as a company if you're an AI focused company? Where do you get the power to drive all that compute that you have to do to run your AI?
Yeah, cheap, clean power is one. Another is you get to do the carbon credits trading. Yeah. Third, but I think realistically, it's going to be optimizing. A lot of the data handling we do in security is really dumb. For example, when you look at a lot of the, the NDR platforms, they're not optimizing the data that they're looking at. And I think that is really where a lot of the advantage is going to be. So instead of paying all that money for power, it's going to be, hey, let's be smarter about the data that we grab. So instead of just having bigger periods between when we look at the data because of the cost, let's optimize it. Let's be smarter. And there has been a lot of work done from a lot of the companies out there in that area.
Yeah. So, obviously that's startups, but what's your thoughts on mergers and acquisitions next year? Like I said, there's 3,500 plus businesses, cybersecurity companies. You think we're going to see consolidation going on?
Not from any of the big ones. Like, again, I think that a lot of the startups are going to continue to get absorbed, and big companies will continue to get small ones to help them get a faster sort of go to market. And a lot of the, the companies out there, it's almost like a mill that they handle on that side that they just churn to absorb new companies, and usually not successfully accommodate them internally or integrate them. But, I think it's going to continue. But there are fewer startups and fewer viable ones right now out there. And many of them are so overinvested with that cheap money that they're just not consumable. So I think instead of, M&A, I think we're going to see possibly a few fire sales happen with some of these overinvested companies have to bite the bullet and sell for, less than what their investors are expecting to get back from them.
Yeah, well, think about BlackBerry just sold Cylance to Arctic Wolf, I think it was, and the amount of loss that they have to write off because of that it's pretty incredible, huh?
Yeah, and so I think a lot of the investors are taking a hard look at the money they put into these companies, saying, well, what can we get out now? And yes, if they can get a great advantage out of it, that's cool. But opportunities to do that for some of these really overinvested companies are tough. Some of the other startups, not an issue, but for these ones that took in hundreds of millions of dollars, they're not going to get that out.
Yeah, which kind of leads me to the next topic, Greg, which is a shift in the industry. You're starting to see a shift where towards a more platform approach, right? Palo has been, the CEO of Palo has been talking a lot about this. CrowdStrike's been talking about it. Trend, obviously, we've been building a platform approach. And if you look at it, best of breed, which was the traditional model, I'm going to put the best product at all the different areas of my attack surface and within my infrastructure. Hopefully those products do well. The problem we're starting to see is that they don't collaborate, they don't communicate. It's very difficult to get visibility across all of these different products. So are we going to see kind of a big shift towards that platform approach next year, or do we think it's going to take kind of people kicking and screaming to move to that type of model?
No, it's inevitable. It's been inevitable for a while. I think it was about 14 years ago, I wrote a research note that had the terms like glue between the silos, and that's what's been missing. So we now have that glue between the silos. So that's there. It's just the behavior of doing this point product sort of bake off. That's what we're used to, and that's how our whole industry is kind of centered around. But that's the part I think that has to change. So clearly now we're not in the days where we used to see supposed suites or of products that just didn't work together. In fact, you could often get competitors' products working together yourself, sometimes better. But no, the suites are here, the platforms are here, and it's just inevitable. Now, products do take time to cycle out or for you to refresh them or change them out. They have a lifespan, typically 3 to 5 years, depending what it is. So that is, I think, the greatest holdup rather than the change in technology. But the advantages you get now when you get 2 + 2 = 5 when you bring stuff together, it just works. And but it's evaluating the true integration rather than just the claims. That's the work.
Yeah, but this brings up something that is always interesting to me. Is you remember McAfee with the EPO kind of an environment, right? They built this ecosystem where all these third parties could integrate into the EPO platform, so to speak. And I don't think it really kind of fulfilled the promise of what it is, and we're starting to see the same thing, I think, with the platform approach where, do you use native sensors or do you go to third party sensor? Like, again, you go to a best of breed, but you have that capability to pull in the data and get all the collaborative capabilities that you didn't have in the past through a platform that can do it for you. But I don't know. I mean, what's your thoughts on that kind of native versus non-native approach?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that glue between the silos, that was actually targeted at EPO at the time when I wrote that. It was a good idea. However, execution was everything, right? You can't sort of have a walled garden and integrate other people as well. And that's what that was the failure in execution there, that you must have it open as possible. And your own stuff can't be limited. So you can't have internal kind of things holding you back. Now, reality is not everything is going to go with one vendor, but you're going to have a dominant platform vendor, and then you're going to have your third-party stuff, and that should integrate in. So you have to look at both. One is, how does my platform integrate? Am I getting better advantage by going with the better together? But for all my other stuff, are they integrating it? So those are the two questions. So as you sort of design your strategy, those are the two questions you're going to have to answer, and really answer it, not just go for the, what's popular or what, who has the best marketing. You've got to really see what they're doing with the data that they're getting, and can they combine it in new ways that's better, not just two silos that kind of just jam together and say, hey, it's a platform.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's kind of been the model, is the bolt-on security model, right? I'll bolt on here, bolt on there, bolt on here. The question now is, will the API environment be able to give you that kind of synergy and capability moving forward? But the other aspect is AI. Can AI actually be that glue that can pull the stuff together? I don't know. We'll see. But certainly the industry is shifting towards that approach where you have a platform that's driven by AI, generative AI, agentic AI, which is the new kind of term that everybody's starting to throw out, and see some of that happening in the market. Is that going to give better results? And that's ultimately what's going to, be success or not, is, does it give me better security in the, moving forward than the previous model, right?
Yeah, I think the advantage for AI is going to be in looking at all that telemetry and helping you make sense of it. That is going to be the real advantage to a platform. And as you get more and more info, helping you draw it together. Sadly, though, if you have a really crappy API environment and a really small aperture to it, AI can't help you there. It's got a limited data set, and it can't create the data that you're not giving it. So, really rich API, and then using AI underneath that to really help make sense of that data and to really pull that out, what's being shared. I think that's the future to getting there, as rich a data environment as possible.
Yeah, and I think the big piece is going to be, what are you training? What data are you training that AI model with? And that's where I think you're going to see a bit of a shift moving forward, where some of these vendors, and I'll say Trend Micro for obviously we work there, but the amount of data that we have about threats and campaigns and adversaries is a lot more than the vast majority of the vendors out there. And we're training our AI model on 35 years of data that we've harvested over the years. We've got tons of content that we've published over the years that you can train the data on. We can even look at, obviously, going and pulling and harvesting data from our competitors' content to get that information about what's going on. Like MITRE, you could go scrub the MITRE attack data and pull all that data into your training model. So now you have all that adversaries and all the TTPs that those adversaries are using. And then you use that to train the models, and that allows you to be able to do what we're talking about, which is predicting the threat path moving forward, the attack path moving forward, because you have all of this historical data that you're training on, and building those much better models. So, as the old saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. If you put in great data, you can get great data out. So that's, I think, going to be what's going to change a little bit of the talk inside the industry. Who has that data and can utilize it the most effectively?
Yeah, back to your point about startups that you mentioned, which is really relevant here, is how are they going to get access to that kind of data now? So it puts them at a disadvantage if they're going to go down this path, let alone the AI costs in looking at that. And your garbage in, garbage out is really relevant. It also puts pressure on the SIM vendors as well, that they're looking at alerts. They're not looking at that native data and telemetry. So like in photography, if you have the raw file, you can do so much more with it. And that's where, XDR, native telemetry, and native data comes in. It's just, if you have that, you can make new connections. If you're just getting these boiled down alerts, you're not getting much through the pipes then.
Yeah, I saw a comment from an analyst just this morning, in fact, where they were talking about threat data versus threat intelligence. And they're like, the difference there is that threat intelligence actually looks at how does it affect that organization and can it tie it back to that organization. So,
Right.
If I'm just spewing out threat data to anybody and everybody that they're with no context, it's pretty bad. That's not going to give you much information. You're not going to know how to use that data, or do you even need to use that data? So I think you're going to see that also shift as you have to build more customized threat feeds and threat intelligence information for your customers, and because the customer wants to only have to deal with stuff that affects them. I don't care about my neighbor down the street or this other company on the other side of the world. I care about what's happening in my environment, who's attacking me, how are they attacking me. And if you can't build that model or build that platform that can get that and very quickly ascertain what's going on in my organization and who's targeting me and how they're targeting me and how can we prevent it and block them or get them out of my network, you're going to lose in the end. So that's what's going to, I think, in 2025, we're going to see a pretty big shift in the industry in terms of who's a winner and who's a loser.
Yeah, you've connected the dots really nicely there to show that, you just had the intel. That alone doesn't help you. It's just a bunch of noise. Then you take that analysis, and that's where it gets valuable. And then you have to look at the risk of it, right? And so, when we talk about risk rating, risk scoring, that at the end is what matters to me. So yes, there's intel. Yes, there's some new attacks going on, but so what? Next thing is, do I have these kinds of, platforms that are vulnerable? And if so, are we actually vulnerable to them? Where are these located? Then you go from the attack surface to the risk score. And then backwards, you say, okay, I have this high risk. What can I do to my attack surface? So as you slide up and down that scale, that's where you want to be.
Yeah, and as we've talked in the past on a number of our conversations, Greg, the CISO role has changed pretty dramatically over the years, and right now I think it's a very important time for CISOs to truly look at their strategy, how they're implementing cybersecurity, cyber risk management. All of that is going to be crucial in 2025 and moving forward. So I think this next year is going to be an interesting one to watch and see. The companies that are successful are the ones that actually have taken a hard look at how are they implementing cybersecurity, cyber risk within their organizations, and they're adopting these newer models that are going to work much more effectively moving forward.
Yeah, CISO job is so different, and you're right. And right now the conversations that are happening in boardrooms in reality, but the real conversations are, this is about an overlap mixing between, cyber and the business. And that is a very few people out there can have that discussion. And trying to have that discussion without being armed with good information is really tough. But, if you mix that, the right person mixed with the right information, man, that's one of these top tier CISOs that are like unicorns.
Yeah. It's the same issue they're having with trying to find people that understand AI and how they can implementing AI into business. Same thing. We had the same issue happening when cloud first came out, right? So all this new tech requires lots of new skill sets, lots of new education and understanding. So, it's going to be a fun year, I think, Greg. I'm looking forward to 20. But this will be my 29th year in cybersecurity. I know you're way past that, right?
Yeah, I'm losing track now. I think I started in 88. So it's what are we at? I'm 36, 37. So yeah.
Like that.
And our COO has one more year than me in the business. So
yeah, that's crazy. I mean, but our CEO, Eva Jen, is she's 35 years in the industry,
right.
Started in the company back in 1988. So about the same time you did. So
yeah. No, Kevin Simser, our COO, he has one more year.
Yeah, Kevin Simser, COO, has got a lot of years in this industry too. So, and that's one of the things I love about working at Trend is that we have a lot of old timers that can kind of understand and have a lot of education, a lot of experience, and can share that with everybody out there. And that's what we're doing now. So, everybody, thanks for joining us on episode 38 of Trend Talks BizSec. Greg, it was a great conversation today. Really appreciate it.
Great thing. Hey, and learn those fundamentals. We talk about how long we've been in the business or whatever, but the key part is if you learn fundamentals, that is a neglected part of our business. You want to be successful? to that.
Exactly. Well, listen, everybody, have a great holiday season. Stay safe, stay healthy. And Greg and I will be back probably after the end of the year in January for another episode of Trend Talks BizSec. Certainly give us a like or give us a comment on a topic you'd like us to cover in the future. We'd love to do that as well. So everybody have a great day, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Hey, happy holidays.